Since 2014, a major spark has occurred involving Weekly Shonen Jump and arena fighters. The title J-Star Victory Versus was released in Japan in March 2014. Published by Bandai Namco and developed by Chunsoft, the game was considered by many as their manga version of Smash. A year later, Bandai Namco localized the game and released it on PS4 consoles as J-Star's Victory Versus Plus, with not much improvement and an added arcade mode. The reason for this localization was more so a test to the market whether or not the Western audience will buy into this sort of game. The results from this test led us to Jump Force. Jump Force is the most successful jump crossover game ever made. The developers took a page out of one of the most successful anime games of all time in Dragon Ball Xenoverse 2 and tossed in the 15 most successful action manga series ever. The formula worked perfectly, despite the unwarranted backlash from fans who wanted the obscure series to be a part of it. 2023 will mark the 55th anniversary of Weekly Shonen Jump magazine, meaning a video game will be released in 2024 to represent it. This is my video essay on what Bandai Namco and Chunsoft should do to nail this crossover as the greatest jump crossover of all time. I don't know whether this video will be a two-parter series or not, but just know we are talking features, gameplay, roster, and story. Please make sure to drop a like on this video and interact. I want us to really give this a shot. Hopefully someday we will be lucky enough to get the game we all deserve. When it comes to an all-star matchup game, the one glaring highlight of those games is the roster selection. In Jump Force, there were 16 series selected, 40 playable base characters with 14 additional DLC characters and 3 freebies tossed in for a whopping 57 playable characters. That's a lot of characters for an all-star fighting game. Heck, that's more playable characters than the Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3 series. The roster is important because whether the game runs like complete dog crap or is at least decent, the roster will always be the most talked about thing, which can make or break a series completely. Some people not aware believe that J-Stars had a bigger roster, but that's actually false. It was the representation of 32 series versus 16 series that has people fooled. I've owned both series, and from a gameplay standpoint, J-Stars cannot lace Jump Force boots. But from a representation of an anniversary title, Jump Force is defeated by J-Stars for the most part. I believe Bandai Namco and Spike needs to spend a little bit more money on getting these licensing for the 55th anniversary game. Everyone from Jump Force and J-Star's Victory Versus has to automatically be in the base roster somehow. We need an everyone is here type announcement for this one. The decision to leave the gag characters out like Jaguar, Yumeta Taro, and Ryotsu made sense because they were going for a more realistic Avenger knockoff, but leaving gag characters like Koro Sensei, Gintoki, and Kagura is a no-go. This has to be done correctly, and they have to go all in on this game to get the overwhelming support that they deserve. When Jump Force was first announced, I made a mock-up roster that made sense since the director came out and stated that non-action manga series were not going to be a part of the roster going forward. I had 34 series, which were 2 more than J-Stars, but most of the gag were replaced, especially those who were support only. I didn't get the majority of it right, but I knew newer series like My Hero and Black Clover would make the cut. For this new game, I would have 55 series representing Jump Force 2, or whatever the sequel name may be. I will explain how we will make this all work when we get to the gameplay aspect, but 55 for 55 years of Weekly Shonen Jump. That's a great selling point right there if you ask me. The roster will consist of playable and support characters similar to what J-Stars originally had, but we are still going to stick with the 1v1 aspect when it comes to fighting. The reason Jump Force made way more money and sold more and even lasted longer was because the game looked like the Storm series from afar. It had a professional setting to it, whereas J-Stars had a 2v2 chaos between friends, which means nothing in the long run when you're trying to catch up to the fighting scene with Storm 4, One Justice on the market, etc. I will now go over the series and the characters that will represent Jump Force sequel, and why I feel like I think this roster will ultimately make everyone happy. Representing our first series, Assassination Classroom, Koro Sensei of course. Representing Bastard, Dark Schneider. Beelzebub, Tatsumi Oga paired with Baby Bill, returning from J-Star's Victory Versus as a playable character. Representing Black Clover, the returning Asta from Jump Force, Noelle, Yuno, and Captain Yami. Representing Bleach, because we're gonna have the big three plus Dragon Ball have 10 characters this time around, guys. I know it's a lot, but it has to make sense. You have to add 3 to all 4 of those series. So Bleach will have Ichigo Kurosaki, Sosuke Aizen, Renji, Yoruichi, Hitsugaya, Grimmjow, Rukia, Yhwach, Byakuya, and Kenpachi. Yes, Byakuya and Kenpachi were both scrapped from Jump Force. They will make an appearance in the Jump sequel. Representing Bobo Bobobo paired with Don Patch, returning from J-Star's Victory Versus. Representing Boso Reiken, you got Kazuki Moto and Papillon. Another new series being added, Chainsaw Man. You're gonna have Denji and Makima. Returning for City Hunter, Ryo Saiba. Representing Chinyuki, Yameta Taro. We'll get to him later on, maybe in the next video, but we'll get to why he's gonna be in the roster, but may not be playable. But I'll talk about that later. Space Adventure Cobra of course. Dr. Slump, we have Arale. Dr. Stone, we got Senku. Like I said, I'll get to why these people are selected in the game at a later time. Representing D. Grayman, we have Alan Walker and Millennium Earl. So we have a villain being added to the roster for the storyline purposes, and he will be playable. And Alan Walker returns from J-Star Victory Versus, but this time as a playable character. Dragon Ball will have Son Goku, Vegeta, Frieza, Cell, Good Boo, Piccolo, Trunks, Teen Gohan, Android 18, and Jiren from Dragon Ball Super. And that can go either way. You can drop Jiren for Broly, but I think Jiren will make more sense to introduce the Dragon Ball Super roster. That's the best pick for me. Dragon Quest will have 4 playable characters, but they will have 5 characters on a roster. You have Dai, Hyankuro, Pop, and Demon King Burn, and a support character of Mam. I will get to that at another time, like I told you guys before. Representing iShield 21 as a support-only character, you have Senna. Fist of the North Star, you have Kenshiro, and the returning Rao from J-Star Victory Versus. Like I said, we're going to try to bring back the J-Star's characters as new characters. Now, I don't know if you're going to be on board about this one, but Demon Slayer will have 3 playable characters and a 1 support-only character. The 3 playable characters, Tanjiro, Inosuke, Nezuko. Support-only, Zenitsu. Representing Gintama, Gintoki, and Kagura as both playable characters. They return from J-Star Victory Versus as playable characters, similar to what Hisoka did. Representing Haku, Shoyo Hinata, support-only character. Hell Teacher Nube, of course, you have Nube, returning from J-Star's Victory Versus as a playable character. Representing Hoshinangle, Takubo, as a support-only character. Representing the JoJo Bizarre Adventure roster, we have Jonathan Joestar and Joseph Joestar returning from J-Star's Victory Versus, Jotaro Kujo, Dio, Giorno, and Diavolo. Now, I'm not going to speak on Stone Ocean because that could possibly be DLC, but for now, I'm just adding Diavolo and Giorno to base roster. Representing Hitman Reborn, you have Suna and Hibari joining the new roster. Hibari be a first-time playable character, and Suna will be returning from J-Star's Victory Versus. Adding a good old series, but a new series to the lineup, Keiji. So adding Keiji Mita to the roster, you have a strong Kenshiro-type character added to the roster. I think a lot of people will go for that. Representing Kinnikuman. Representing Kachekame Ryotsu, but he will be support only, guys. We already have Ryo Saiba and Ryotsu are pretty much the same character. Having Ryotsu as a support only, I think works out even better than having him as a playable character. You keep the kookiness down a bit, so you keep the realism with the playable characters and the kookiness that don't make sense as support only characters. I think he'll work out just fine as support only character. Representing Kuroko no Basket, Kuroko, support-only character. Representing Supernatural Detective Nero, he will be now a playable character instead of being relegated to a support character in J-Star's Victory Versus. Representing Madaka Box, we're going to have Madaka Korakami and Kumagawa as both playable characters this time around. This one's a new one for us. We're going to have Muyo and Roji's Bureau of Supernatural Investigation. Muyo and Roji will both be playable as one character, kind of similar to like the Ice Climbers. We're going to have them as one single character. I think that will work out just fine. You can do the same thing with Android 18 if you want to get fancy with it. Representing My Hero Academia, you have Midoriya, All Might, Todoroki, and Bakugo returning from Jump Force. Now you're going to add Uraraka, Shigaraki, and Toga to the roster because they needed added 3 characters, similar to the big 4. Representing Naruto, you got Naruto Uzumaki, Sasuke Uchiha, Madara Uchiha, Kakashi, Gaara, Boruto, Kaguya, Kawaki, Jigen, and Sarada Uchiha makes up the Naruto characters. Representing Nezuko Chitogi as a support-only character. Representing Ryo no Mango, Rikuo Nora. I think adding Nora to the game, he's just a good character. He's always missing out on these all-star matchups. I think Nora being a part of this as a playable character will open a lot of people's eyes, especially those in the 2000s that were into that type of manga. It's like, oh my gosh, this character's actually going to be playable? Yes, I think Nora being added to the roster makes a whole lot of sense to me. Representing One Piece, we're going to have Monkey D. Luffy, Sabo, Boa Hancock, Blackbeard, Zoro, Sanji, Law returning from Jump Force. Also returning, Portugal D. Ace and Akanu from J-Stars will be playable somehow through the story. We'll just put them in there and have Nami added to the roster as well. Representing Pio Tufuko, Jaguar. He's coming back as a support-only character. I loved him in J-Star. I thought he was fun. He was the best because he had a great cooldown and he distracts you on the screen so you can get a lot of combos off. So I think bringing Jaguar back is really, really good. Representing Rurouni Kenshin again will be Himura Kenshin and Shishio Makoto. The Disastrous Life of Sake K, obviously Sake. You gotta add him to the roster. I think he was great in J-Stars. He's funny, but his moves are believable, and I think adding him to the main roster works out in our favor. Representing Saint Seiya, we're gonna give him 5 characters this time, guys. We're going with Pegasus Seiya, Dragon Shiru, Hyoga, Shun, and Hades. We'll have Hades be added to the roster because he'll play a major part in the story mode as well. Representing Food Wars as a support-only character, Soma. We'll get to that another time as well. Representing Sakegaki, coming back as Momotaro Todoroki. I thought he was an amazing character in J-Stars. I wish he would have been in Jump Force, but that series is not known to the West. But I think it's time to open a lot of people's eyes because this one can be the big one this time, guys. Representing Skit Dance, Bolson, Himiko, and Switch. You gotta bring them back as support-only characters, and they are a big representation of the gag series. From the Lucky Man series, Lucky Man comes back as a support-only character. I think he is better suited with the Lucky Beam as a support move rather than giving him that god-awful mechanic of him getting lucky and unlucky. I think it was good for J-Stars, will not be good for this type of game where you're trying to reach a large audience that's into like Storm-type games. So you want to leave that as a support-only move. Represent Toriko, one of my favorite series. I'm bringing back Toriko and I'm bringing back Zebra as the 2 playable characters. I wouldn't add any more to that because it's going to be a long shot getting them in the roster anyway. Just add them too. For 2 Love Ru, we're going to have Lala come back as a support-only character. I would have put her as a base roster character, but I think it's well to have these support characters have the special buffs and debuffs that would make the matches a bit different than we normally used to in Jump Force. This was even more fun. The Promised Neverland. Have Emma enter the battle as a support-only character. We'll figure out a buff or a debuff for her. I think that you have to represent that series. It took over the summer of maybe 2018 or something like that. So yeah, I think a lot of people will be into that, seeing the Promised Neverland being represented in this game. One of my favorite series, World Trigger. You gotta have World Trigger in the game somehow. You don't need that many characters. Just Yuma. Add Yuma to the game. Works out perfectly fine. Representing Yu Yu Hakusho, you have Yusuke Urameshi, Hiei, Younger Toguro, Kurama, and Sensui will join the battle. I will have him as a villain for the story mode as well. He'll play a major part as well, similar to Aizen, but you know, giving Yu Yu Hakusho 5 characters works out for me. Representing Yu-Gi-Oh!, we're going to have the God Trio of Yugi, Seto Kaiba, and of course Yami Merrick added to the roster. Representing JJK, now this roster's a little hard. We're going to have Ichidori, of course, Megumi, and I'm going to go with Gojo just to sell the pack. Normally I would say no to Gojo because he's too strong, but just to sell the game, having Gojo on the roster, you gotta have him on the roster somehow. I don't know how to make it work. If they ask me, I know how to make it work, but add them to the roster, it works out just fine. Representing Hunter x Hunter, you got Gonfrix, Hisoka, Killua, Bisky, Kurapika, Miram, Corolo, and Pito. Add those 2 characters to the roster, not as costumes, but as playable characters. I think a lot of people will be happy with just them 2 added for the Hunter x Hunter roster. And of course, Death Note has Light Yagami. That makes 55 series if you count Boruto series. The reasoning for this roster is that it simply represents 55 years of Weekly Shonen Jump entirely. Are some little known series missing? Absolutely. Is it a big deal? Not at all. Getting all these licenses is going to be a stretch anyway. You are likely going to see these names in a mobile game rather than a fully functioning console game. The roster will have 122 playable characters and 15 support-only characters on the roster. No one who was playable in Jump Force will be moved down to support-only. And yes, the CAC has to return to the roster because there is a lot of unfinished business in that area. The CAC was the lifeline to this game, and the reason why Xenoverse 2 is still alive till this day. Focusing on different fighting types like the previous version gives players more freedom and options when making their jump character. Adding in body types and better expressions should be the top priority for CAC development as well. Guys, I talked a lot in this video. I'm going to continue this video as a part 2 for the story and so on. Thanks for watching and keep up the support, guys. I appreciate it.